It's an image that left a nation outraged and some fans around the world claiming racism. Some South African cricketers took a knee, a gesture to show support for the Black Lives Matter movement, but some did not, embarrassing Cricket South Africa, which quickly ruled that players must participate, a mandate Quinton de Kock objected to and opted not to play. He has since apologised. Here's part of his Instagram statement. I would like to start by saying sorry to my teammates and the fans back home. I'm deeply sorry for all the hurt, confusion and anger that I have caused. I was quiet on this very important issue until now. For those who don't know, I come from a mixed race family. Black lives have mattered since I was born. But let's rewind because some questions still remain. Ahead of de Kock's apology, I spoke to the chairman of Cricket South Africa, who told me how important it was to have a unified approach.
Unfortunately, the team were not able to agree on a uniform or consensus position. And, these discussions have been ongoing and the board kept itself apart from that in the hope that the team would resolve it amongst themselves. When it became apparent last Saturday in the opening game of the World Cup against Australia, where we had the images of the South African team, the Proteas, with three different gestures being adopted. Some players taking the knee, some players just standing and raising a fist, and others merely standing with their hands behind the backs. And we as a board felt that this did not display the unity that we sought to portray, that it didn't send a strong signal of a commitment to combating racism from the team. And that's not the image that we want a team that represents South Africa to be conveying to a global audience, particularly at an event as important as an ICC T20 World Cup, particularly in the context of other teams at the World Cup, including Australia, England, New Zealand, India, West Indies, uniformly taking the knee and making very little quibble about it and explaining it very simply as their contribution to raising awareness about the fight against racism globally. And we felt that given South Africa's particular history of apartheid and institutionalized racial discrimination, it was important that a team that represents South Africa sends out a similarly strong signal.
Did you have any indication at any point before the next match began that Quinton de Kock was going to take the action that he took?
We had no indication that there would be any repercussions to the decision that we took. We expected that the decision would be respected, indeed, as it was by all of the other players in the team and the full management complement that is there with the team in the UAE at the moment. So ahead of the game against the West Indies, after Quinton de Kock had made himself unavailable for selection, the rest of the team and squad duly took the knee before that game. And that's what we expected. So the decision by de Kock himself came as a surprise to us.
He's being painted around the world on social media and in other discussions as a racist. Do you believe that he is? Have you had the opportunity to speak with him to find out his reasons for not taking a knee and deciding rather to withdraw?
I don't believe that any member of the South African squad in the UAE, any member of the management team there is racist in any way. I think the team have worked extremely hard in recent years in particular to confront the issues that face us in South Africa, which are the same issues that confront people globally. And racism, as I said earlier, in the context of our history, is a particularly important one. So I don't think there's any suggestion of any hint of racism being behind any of the concerns that may have been raised or coming out of the team environment. It's about how to display that. And that's where the board has been very firm and decisive in terms of saying that this is a gesture of our commitment as a team towards an anti-racist stance. And we expect the team to behave in a manner that is befitting of that stance and clearly demonstrates a commitment to combating racism at all levels. And so that's the position we take. It's not about any particular player. And we have no doubt that the issue of race is being adequately addressed within the team. It's a matter of how it's being portrayed visually.
The South African Cricketers Association said that this mandate created a crisis that didn't need to happen. So I wonder, with the benefit of hindsight, whether you think it was better to see a whole lot of individuals expressing or not expressing their commitment to fighting racism, or was it better to have a mandated illusion of unity that may not be genuinely felt?
The team is committed to an anti-racist agenda and to combating racism. The problem comes about as a result of how that is depicted in the manner that it has been, with the disparate forms of gestures that have been adopted. And it sends a lukewarm or watered down impression of that commitment and leads to questioning of that commitment. And we felt it was therefore important, going on the basis of what the players tell us, that there have been these discussions, there is a clear-cut commitment amongst themselves. And our view was that if such a commitment exists, then the simplest thing to demonstrate that, and to demonstrate it powerfully, is to do what the rest of the world is doing and take a knee before a game. That was the simple issue. It's a simple issue of saying this is about a principled moral issue of saying we stand against racism.
So will there be punishment or repercussions for Quinton de Kock?
This is not about threatening players or imposing sanctions or penalties against them. This was a well-considered decision of the board, a unanimous decision of the board, I might add, that this is the right thing to do.
Lawson, Naidoo, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Tracey.
So how have South Africans reacted? Firdose Moonda is ESPN's Southern Africa cricket correspondent. She's told The Ticket there's been complete outrage on two fronts in de Kock's home country.
So there's the outrage to our outrage that freedom of expression has potentially been infringed upon. And then the other half who are, very upset that this player from a minority, from a privileged group, has made it so clear that he doesn't want to do something that would stand with the majority and that would show support for the majority.
Some people have come out and said there's no way Quinton de Kock is racist, while others are wondering exactly what his position is on Black Lives Matter.
He's quite a basic individual who, in fact, when he started playing cricket, even said, I don't like talking about cricket, I prefer fishing. So he seems to kind of have one goal in life and one thing that really makes him happy, which is fishing. And beyond that, I don't think he thinks too much. And he said so himself. I don't overthink the game. I don't overthink things. The things we do know about him, he was born in 1992, so it was just before South Africa's democracy. And so he would not have firsthand experienced the horrors of apartheid. However, he would have had caregivers, he would have had parents, he would have had people around him who would have influenced and shaped his ideas. And I think that's quite important in that it probably applies to everybody in the team at this stage, all of this particular generation. These things don't just go away. So I think calling him a racist is taking it a little bit too far, because I think every South African, all of us, we have prejudice so ingrained in us. We look at another person and the first thing we see is the color of their skin. And it's not really entirely our fault. It's the way that our society was structured for several hundreds of years. I don't know what work Quinton de Kock is doing to overcome that. I don't think labeling him an out-and-out racist is really going to help. I think we need to try and understand, what is it about this gesture that so offends him? Because he makes other gestures. Or is it that he doesn't want to be forced by his employer? And if so, what is the issue around being forced? And we just need to understand what he understands about race.
De Kock lost the captaincy earlier this year. Is his relationship with Cricket South Africa strained?
I think the kind of backstory to that is that there was a little bit of lack of communication, in that he just suddenly found out he was being taken away from the captaincy in all formats, which I'm sure must be a hurtful thing to go through. And I can understand that. So I think absolutely there would be some fractures now. I also think historically, Cricket South Africa don't communicate well with players. The one person who de Kock has a good relationship with is the coach, Mark Boucher, and we know that that's a good relationship. So hopefully he's able to receive some support and mentorship there. He would also have quite a good relationship with guys like Kagiso Rabada, Dwayne Pretorius, Themba Bavuma himself. They all played in the same domestic team and came up at the same time. So hopefully they're having conversations. I really also wonder if he's thinking about his teammates and about the impact he's having. People talk about, let's all do this for the team. Maybe that's the only people he's got to do it for right now, and maybe that will be enough.
That's Firdose Moonda, ESPN's Southern Africa cricket correspondent, speaking to me earlier. Brendan Schwab is the Executive Director of the World Players Association, and Molina Asthana is a lawyer and founder of Multicultural Women in Sport. Thank you both for joining me. Do you think, Molina, that sports governing bodies should be mandating what athletes should advocate for and what they should think?
The mandate is an interesting one, I think. The public projection of an organization's stand can be done in different ways, and this is just one form of it. If they can do it through a public campaign or through posters or an organizational policy can be made available to the public, then requiring the players to take a united and consistent stance against racism is no different. And you would expect every employee or a contractor of the company to follow it, including players. It can be a powerful medium for conveying the message, especially for a team of a country where the majority was subjected to a system of institutionalized racial segregation for decades.
Brendan, where do you sit on that?
Well, I think, Tracey, this is a very interesting case in that we are seeing the lack of coherence in many ways of global sport in dealing with racism and human rights matters throughout the world. This is unique in that we are seeing a player refuse to abide by a mandated stance which was imposed just a number of hours before the event took place. We've also had a situation, of course, where the International Olympic Committee has tried to suppress athlete expression at the recent Tokyo Olympic Games. And if we go back to the genesis of this stand of taking the knee, it's a stand which cost Colin Kaepernick his career. So there is a lack of coherence.
Sport talks a lot about what they can do, the positive influence they are having. Recently, there's barely a discussion that is had that doesn't bring about diversity and inclusion. But what happens then when you have a situation where morals or values or stances on something actually clash? So how does sports navigate that?
I just think this is, as Brendan said as well, this is a human rights issue. How can a pro-human rights mandate be negotiable or optional in any way? I have been advocating for sporting organizations to embed human rights in every aspect of their sporting business, in according with the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, the UNGPs, and in mega sporting events. And I am in support of any anti-discrimination measures adopted by them. We wouldn't be having this debate if this was embedded in the systems. There is institutionalized racism that exists. There's systemic racism that exists in sporting bodies. We've seen that in Australia. We've seen that overseas. More needs to be, I agree that more needs to be done at every level. And perhaps a sanction against a player who doesn't comply may send a strong message. The taking of the knee may not be enough, but it is a start.
I suppose, though, the question is mandating it. It just comes back to that, doesn't it, Brendan? And you have a situation even with Adam Goodes in AFL, somebody who does stand for something and then gets booed out of the game. I mean, it's such a complex area. You've done a lot of work with football. Have they got it right yet?
Well, I don't think any sport has got it right, and I think we do need to be comfortable in knowing that sometimes the sport and human rights conversation is going to be messy. If we are going to embed respect for human rights, we can't embed one's own view about what that means. Freedom of expression is an internationally recognised human right, and that is subject to certain restrictions, including, of course, not promoting hatred or vilification. But other players in English soccer, for example, have decided not to take a knee because they're now concerned that the gesture is devoid of meaning and that more significant action is taken. So human rights requires complex conversations.
Brendan Schwab and Molina Asthana, thank you both for your time.
Thank you, Tracey.
Thank you.
That's all for the program this week. Tune into the Ticket podcast for more on this discussion. But for now, thanks for watching. Goodbye.